Hello, my name is Ryan Doogan, and the question motivating my story today is how do I get my head and my heart to move in the same direction? Now, it may be unclear at first what I mean by that. By both nature and nurture, I tend to be a pretty intellectual type and spend a lot of time in my head. In my head, I believe all these things about Jesus, in theory, but those beliefs don't seem to make a meaningful impact on the course of my life. What I believe is more determined by my circumstances than what God says about me. I grew up in a Christian home and had an experience of God early in my teen years that rooted my relationship with God at a level deeper than my intellect, which also had the benefit of inoculating me against the skepticism of faith in general that's pretty typical of my personality type. Growing up, I was pretty quiet, pretty shy, and generally didn't draw attention to myself. The big downside of this, of course, is that I would tend to get overlooked and wonder if I had anything of value to offer the world as a result. I remember, for example, getting overlooked for a baseball travel team one summer despite having the highest batting average in the league that year, which is silly, but when you're 14 is basically the end of your world. However, it did give me the opportunity to go to a Catholic teen retreat, which ended up being my first real experience of God. My doubt showed up more in skepticism that my faith would have any meaningful impact on my circumstances or the way I lived my life. God was God, and everything else was up to me. I believed that God was real, and I would go to heaven, but down here, even my very best would probably never be enough. I am the eldest of three, born and raised in Juneau, Alaska, in a culture that aspires towards self-sufficiency, towards independence, towards the ideal of the mountain man that doesn't need anyone. But I did need people, because I wasn't so strong that I could face my challenges alone. Growing up Christian, unfortunately, doesn't immunize you from sin or its consequences, and my family was no different. My family was wonderful, but flawed in its own ways, and being the eldest, I bore the brunt of those challenges. I responded in two ways. I became a loner, someone who's independent and pioneering, who might move 3,000 miles across the country, but also extremely alone and very socially vulnerable. And I responded by checking out, which is learning to avoid and hide from hard things, becoming what today we would call an avoidant personality, and being pretty developmentally delayed in some areas as a result. My drugs of choice were some combination of porn, computer games, scrolling, and consuming information. Have you ever read a full-length Atlantic feature article during the workday to avoid working on a problem you don't know how to solve? I have, probably several times. All that aside, the results weren't great. All talk of mountaineering aside, I'm not actually very outdoorsy. I've still never gone hunting, and I didn't fit in very well in Alaska. And being a loner made those social challenges even harder. So I did undergrad in the state of Minnesota, where I also didn't fit in. And without the support of family, even my academics, which had previously been a strength, were heavily impacted. I was just really lonely and depressed for a lot of my time there. Now, I was involved in church throughout this period, but I very much identified with Paul in Romans 7:18 through 20. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. My head believes some things about Jesus, but my heart was off in another direction. I ended up in DC largely by accident. My first gig out of undergrad happened to be out here. I found the district church a little while later, and here we are, coming up on 9 years later. And during that time, the question of how to get my head and my heart to work together has been answered. I've learned to walk in the Spirit, however imperfectly, because walking in the Spirit is how my mind is renewed, and a renewed mind is how my head and my heart can work together, instead of fighting one another. Romans 8:5-6 says that those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on what the flesh desires. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds set on what the Spirit desires. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. Here's what that looked like for me. I had a lot of growing up to do when I moved out here, but before I could really mature, I think I needed assurance of my own value in order to have the security to actually take the steps I needed to take to grow. Finding that security was an uneven process. My birthday is right near Christmas, close enough that I've spent a lot of birthdays sitting in airports, most often SeaTac in Seattle, on the way back to Alaska. Most other people are also visiting family around that time of year, which means I very rarely get birthday parties with friends. So if I were to pick one moment that helps solidify my sense of self-worth, I would probably pick the time a friend organized a birthday party for me and another friend with a Christmas/New Year's birthday. It was a simple thing, but it was the first birthday party I had in quite a while, and it honestly rocked my world. Knowing that I was worth celebrating helped give me the security I needed to take the risks that growth entails. So what did growth look like for me? One of the tougher asks for a loner is to be able to receive things. I've lived in the city proper my entire time in the area, and so I've never really needed a car, and I can get basically anywhere in the area on my own. But sometimes people offer me rides, and as silly as it sounds, growth is being willing to accept the offer, and not just find my own way home, even if I easily could. As it turns out, some of my strongest friendships have been formed in large part just sitting in the passenger seat and having heart-to-hearts with people. And for a guy who is often overlooked, someone going out of their way to notice me honestly means a lot. The other side of the coin to being able to receive is being willing to proactively seek out help and then invest into it. Porn was the most problematic of my vices, so it got to be the vector for me to deal with all the other stuff. I got the help I needed here at the district church, did a lot of digging, and I eventually figured out what I was medicating, and then experienced what I think was a genuine miracle. Some of the deeper wounds I was medicating healed, really without me noticing, and when they healed, my cravings for porn and some, but not all, of my other avoidant tendencies were gone, which is pretty cool. I've honestly been continually surprised by how much help is out there if I'm willing to seek it out and invest in it. For me, there's been mentoring, therapy, coaching, support groups, and other more informal things as well. This city and this church have a lot of opportunities. It just requires me to be willing to take step one and say, hi, I'm the problem, it's me, and then take the first small steps to do something about it. Stepping out in faith and trusting that God will use whatever I give to him to bring me to maturity. And as I mature, my faith starts to become something that doesn't just live in my head, but comes alive in my heart as well. Verses like Ephesians 2:10 begin to become real. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. If I am God's handiwork, then I do have something valuable to offer to the world. My value is assured, and I have a clear purpose to do good works that somehow, some way, God prepared in advance for me to do, and to join with God, however imperfectly, in the renewing of the earth.